As you know, the microphone is a relatively recent invention, at least in a university as elderly as this. And I'm going to try to speak without a microphone. My colleagues are much more technologically up to speed, and I'm sure they may want to use a microphone, but I'd like to try without. And first of all, I want to make it absolutely clear that the fact that things today seem so much less cheerful than they did in 1992 has nothing to do with the Europaeum. Though we hope that we can stop any further deterioration in the next few years. I was never terribly concerned about populism until it became popular, and that is perhaps an issue that we can address during the coming discussion. Radek and I were talking just briefly a moment or two ago and agreeing that the countries we knew best were in a terrible mess. This country, with respect to Mr. Johnson, Balliol, Poland, the United States. So we've agreed that we're both going to apply for emigration to North Korea, which seems to organise these things much better. I'm absolutely delighted we've got three such distinguished contributors. What I'm going to do is ask each of them to speak for 10 to 15 minutes at the beginning, and then we can open things up to questions as rapidly as possible. And I want to begin by inviting Derek Lamb to speak to us. We're delighted he could be here. We'd originally invited Joshua Wong, but Joshua Wong is, even as we speak, writing columns for The Guardian from the Stanley prison in Hong Kong, for reasons which I'm sure have much to do with the rule of law. Joshua Wong, as you know, was one of the leaders, perhaps the best known leader of the democracy movement in Hong Kong. Derek Lam has been another leader of the umbrella movement in Hong Kong. I'm going to ask him to speak first, though he won't speak about umbrellas. All right, Derek?
Sure.
You can either speak here or from up there, wherever you'd like.
Both. Okay, maybe here just. Wow. Okay. Can I use this microphone? Hello. Okay.
Why don't you? Have you got one of those?
Thank you so much. Good evening. My name is Derek Lam. I'm so glad I can be here. And, well, the first thing, happy birthday, Europaeum. Yes. And, well, Lord Cutton just say that, well, we try to move to North Korea, but if you want to taste the feeling of under authoritarian government, well, probably you can move to Hong Kong. You can taste the same things. I come from Hong Kong, studying in China 2 years ago. About 19th of May 2050, my best friend, Joshua Wong came to Oxford. He spoke at the Oxford Union about what he's doing in Hong Kong, about the umbrella movement, about what is the young people is doing in Hong Kong for democracy and for freedom. So why I'm here today again? Because Joshua lost his freedom. He was in prison a month ago because his involvement in a peaceful, democratic protest named Umbrella Movement for 6 months. Well, in additional, he probably get more sentence because of his participation in Occupy Mong Kok. So we don't know when can Joshua can back to us. But, well, I'm here to represent my fellows, Joshua, and the other fighters in Hong Kong. What we want to share to the whole world is about the freedom, about our message. I'm Joshua, a classmate. I've been alongside with him since his journey started. We are in the founding of Scholarism together, and I am also now in his political party, Demosisto. I'm one of the third core member of them. Well, the political party that we both belong is a young political party that we're willing to fight for the human right and fight for the democracy and fight for the self-determination right in Hong Kong, and even for the freedom of speech and freedom of religion. Tonight is about the freedom, academic freedom. That's it. But I'm just happy that I can understand the feeling of having freedom in tonight, because I use myself as an example. Probably, I will be in jail less than 1 month. So I am so grateful to be here, and then I can talk about the freedom in Hong Kong, but actually really losing our freedom because I'm having a protest to against the China government due to the interpretation of Hong Kong Basic Law. And well, that is what I can do. However, let's talk about the status from freedom and academic staff and the students since 2014. How is this affected by pro-democracy movement, and what can we do about it? Many of you may be familiar with the name Benny Tai. He was amongst the three of have initiated the movement of Occupy Central with Love and Peace. Back to 2014, after the movement, Dr. Tai used Hong Kong resources to conduct online voting, which got him into trouble with some regulation. The regulation that did not exist before. Pro-Beijing legislator Ho Kun Yu is currently making a campaign for Hong Kong U to fire Dr. Benny Tai. Not only did he write a letter to the Vice Chancellor of Hong Kong U and ask for Dr. Tai's resignation, he even organized a public rally to put political pressure on the institution. And this is only one of the examples where Hong Kong politics is corrupting academic freedom. Dr. Tai currently tried in court for public nuisance in relation of Occupy Central. Sadly, in Hong Kong, it takes more than intellectual brilliance to succeed in academia, and less active civil participation may be the price of that. But about the story of other people, I'm here to tell you about my story, and indeed, our story, the people, the students who fight for democracy. The story of the youth of Hong Kong, what happened to professor, researcher, and the lecturers. Young people only understood from the news and from other second-hand sources. But let me talk about something which is more within my scope, student activism. I acknowledge that academic freedom is more important, it's more about academic staff having the liberty to communicate and discuss ideas without repression. But bear with me as I explain how this is all related, since scholarism is not for scholar but for student in Hong Kong. Since scholarism founded, what we are facing is the leader of student activism. The academic result was chased by the paparazzi. They wouldn't know how good you are, and they use that to blame that, oh, if you're doing student activism, then you're not good at study. They use that to attack the student who take part in the democracy movement. And more than that, the most terrible situation is during the umbrella movement, there was a pro-China group which is strongly against the movement. They set up a hotline to let the people to report the secondary school student who were involved into the student strike or involved into the Occupy movement in 2014. And the pro-China group promised that they will public and they will make the student name, their phone number, and such other information about their social media. They will public those information and then ask for the meeting for the school principal. And that is how the pro-China group to put the pressure of Hong Kong students. And the activists and student activists, this is totally not easy. We even get attacked from overseas. Take an example for my friend, Joshua Wong, who was detained in Thailand airport for 12 hours and just put him back to Hong Kong because of the request of China government. He's forever blacklisted in Thailand. Even more, my another dear friend, Lathan Law, who is 23 years old now, the youngest legislator in Hong Kong, just got disqualified 2 months ago. and the government even want to make him bankrupt. They even want to charge him for more different charges. Nathan is in jail too for 8 months. And before that, when he visited Taiwan and come back to Hong Kong, there are a group of gangsters waiting him in the Hong Kong airport to attack him. Joshua and Nathan, it seems like, who are the big face on the democratic movement, but they're still a student in university. And for some more information about the education, how is Hong Kong education system towards our teenagers? It's clearly that in 2011, the government has tried to push forward the patriotic education, which we're calling national education, to all the students in Hong Kong, to ensure them have the emotional reaction about the feelings to China. The textbook is saying that the Communist Party is progressive, soundness, and union. The standard of the national curriculum is asking the student to have the emotional reaction when they see the national flag is raised up. They should, feeling very touched by this. And this is black and white, cleaned on paper. And in 2012, we formed Scholarism. 100,000 Hong Kong people are on the street against that. And it seems like pushing back. But however, the government are using the same tactics again in this year. Many students has to forced to study a different part, even in Chinese history, in different subject, to learn about how to love China. And there are a lot of history in China, like Mao's revolution, like the Tiananmen Square on 4th of June, but it like the Nobel Prize winner Liu Xiaobo. But do the Hong Kong textbook talk about this information? Absolutely not. No, we cannot see any information there. Today, we are surrounded by fear: the fear to express, the fear of suppressions and persecution, the fear to speak out, even within the walls of university, which used to be considered as the safe haven for free political debate. Just a couple of weeks ago, a banner is on advocating Hong Kong independence, is put it in Chinese University of Hong Kong, which is my university. The Chinese University in Hong Kong has inspired so many people to go to the street, become an activist, and fight for democracy. But however, the banner who advocate Hong Kong independence, and there is another banner who wrote 180's name, though it's those people who get political persecution. I'm quite surprised that the Chinese University and 9 other universities in Hong Kong, the Vice Chancellor, they wrote a joint statement to say that our university is not supporting Hong Kong independence. Even the Hong Kong University governing council chairman, the Alfred Lee, even commented, those students who put a banner in university is what a loser did. Wow. Lord President, who with us tonight, he has given a short comment to what Alfred Lee has said. Lord President said that Alfred Lee is Alfred Lee, so I'll leave you to interpret this phrase. But the youth in Hong Kong, and indeed Hong Kong students, are lost asking much of their learning environment. As stated in one of this slogan as student protest, we simply want to reclaim our client desk. So to say, it probably does not make much sense in English, but as it sense, it means the right and to have a peaceful environment where we can suppose what we can do in this age, which is learning. Well, after listening all this, I thought you may be curious that what happened to us? Why a student will form a political party? Why they even can get a seat in the Legislative Council? Well, I am shared our situation with you with very I just like to share the situation of Demosisto now to all of you. The leader of Demosisto, three of us, is in jail now because of the umbrella movement. Leave it know what disqualified. And then what we have seen is the China government and the Hong Kong government are using the judiciary, are using the law as the political tools to put the force in the pro-democracy legislator and put the force in anti-activists. There's come a judicial review in August, the one that put Joshua Wong, Nathan Law, and Alex Chow in prison. The few were found guilty at the Hong Kong District Court, with former two being sentenced as cumulative service order. But however, after their duty completed, and Alex Chow to suspend 3-week jail sentence, the Department of Justice is very insist to put 3 of them into jail. So they make a judicial review, and the judge claimed that our action, the reclaim of civic square, the word claim is a violent word. It's the word that who incitement of people doing the violence action. This is a very terrible situation in Hong Kong now. We see the young people, we see over 100 young people, over 100 students has been put in jail and will be put in jail soon. I am one of them, and I am really have to say that what terrifies us is not only having a rape. What we have seen the young people in Hong Kong, and we're here to share our will to all of you come from the different part in this world. It's because we believe that there is something key value that we hold together: freedom of speech, freedom of expression, freedom of having political will, and even just very normal a democracy system to have a vote to decide the future. In Hong Kong, that's not going to happen in short term or foreseeable future. What is waiting for us is an authoritarian regime. What's it waiting for the teenagers in Hong Kong? It's jail time. It's the harder punish from the government. Here in this room, every one of you are making this world better. I'm making this whole world a lot better in the future. I'm pretty sure about that. For me, my world is so little. Just a little city on the south of China named Hong Kong. And I do care about the human right there. I do care about the freedom in my city, in my home. And what I would like to ask is, please join us and use different way to help us to protect our freedom, to help us to protect our university, our religious, our different things, because it's all gonna be destroyed very soon. So I hope that I'm here to share a situation. It's a city that is now turning from a civilized city, turning into authoritarian, turning to dictatorship. And I hope that if you guys consider about the situation in Asia, if you guys consider the situation in China, please remember Hong Kong. We can need more help from you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Derek, can I just ask you one factual question? You suggested that if this event was taking place a month from now, you wouldn't be able to be here. Is that right?
Yes, I will back to Hong Kong. I have my trial on 13 October.
What are you being tried for?
well, I'm in trouble for incitement of public disorder because I am using a microphone in one protest, and the police just arrest me at 6 a.m. They break into my home and then take me out.
It's bad luck that the microphones work in Hong Kong.
Yes.
Thank you very much. So you're being pursued because you took part in what we used to call in colonial times an unlawful assembly. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. I'd now like to ask Professor Enyedi, who's the pro-rector of the Central European University, to talk to us. We all know that a former member of this university is now the Prime Minister of Hungary. He was, I think, here on a scholarship funded by George Soros, and is now pursuing the Central European University, which is funded by his former benefactor. I'm not sure we did as good job in educating him as we might have done, but there it is. Professor.
Thank you very much. Shall I use it? So let me start my contribution by thanking European for inviting CEU as a special member for the next year. During the last couple of months, we have received many gestures of support from all around the world, but I think this particular invitation is the most eloquent manifestation of the solidarity from fellow universities. Before I reflect on the main subject, that is whether we are facing here illiberalism and populism, let me, in a nutshell, summarize my university's current state of affairs. About a few months ago, a new law came out that demands new requirements from foreign universities, and if they don't meet them, then the operation of license is withdrawn after 1st of January. The law was prepared in complete secrecy, and the Parliament did not receive more than 24 hours to debate it. Now, there are many conditions that we are supposed to fulfill. One of them is to launch higher education activities in the United States. I'm happy to report that there are negotiations underway between the governor of the state of New York and the Hungarian government, and that these negotiations have already achieved some progress. I'm a little bit less happy to report that they are underway for quite some time by now, that we are excluded from these negotiations and that time is running out. I'm even less happy, if possible, to observe that the political campaign against the founder of the university and the university itself is still in full swing. So coming back to the question of illiberalism and populism, I see that to some extent we face these challenges, but not to the same extent. There is no question that our opponents are illiberal. They say themselves. The Prime Minister has famously said that the project he's engaged in is an illiberal state-building project. And given that he studied at Oxford, I must believe him. Plus, in general, he was, I think, really accurate in this case. But whether they are populists or not, I'm not so sure. I think this is a very complex question. Of course, George Soros is an ideal target for populists around the world, from Macedonia to the United States. And in the media attacks against our university, we could observe a healthy dose of anti-intellectualism. But it would be a mistake, I think, to connect these sentiments to the general anti-establishment mood that swept across the developed world during the last couple of years. And it would be an even bigger mistake to identify our opponents as rednecks. Actually, they are typically highly educated people, Oxford. Some of them are our own alumni, so I must also concur with you that maybe we were able to teach them technical skills, but we haven't been able to convince them that freedom is a value for itself, and that academic freedom is inseparable from freedom of speech and freedom of conscience. Some of them are excellent lawyers. I can see that now when I look at their arguments, how they defend the undefendable position of the government, I must recognize that they are very highly skilled people. That problem is not that they don't value academia, knowledge, high culture. They just have an extremely instrumental approach to all these things. Now, if I try to connect what they do to what is happening in other cases where you meet populists, again, I must say that they are very far from being ideotypical populists. And one indication of that is something that I noticed a few weeks ago when they turned out to care a lot about academic rankings. An academic ranking came out where CEU was not listed, not even at the bottom of the list. And they regarded this piece of information so important that it featured in the main news, in the headlines. CEU is a fake university, is nowhere in the list. They didn't bother to check whether postgraduate universities like CEU are eligible for that particular ranking or not. But I think we can conclude that they consider academic reputation as a relevant standard, and this is a good starting point. Now, being in the turmoil, in such a political turmoil, is not a natural place for a university to be. We face many, many challenges and dilemmas that we haven't faced in the past. One particular example is the fact that during the last couple of months we have lost our name. Suddenly, officials, government officials, and media representatives started to call us the University of George Soros. Nobody calls us Central European University anymore. And insisting on being called by your proper name sounds like a pretty straightforward demand, but actually it's a very complicated issue. We didn't know how to respond. Because if we distance ourselves from our founder in this current situation when he's subject to a campaign that reminds many observers of George Orwell's 1984, then we are not loyal to somebody who deserves loyalty. On the other hand, it's extremely important to point out that we are not private property of anybody, that our endowment gives us full independence. And in general, universities should not be considered as properties and parts of any private or political interest. So it was a very difficult situation for us because we wanted to emphasize our independence, but we also wanted to emphasize our connection with our founder. It turned out that it's difficult to do not only against those who are opponents, but also those who are friends of CEU. The Western media reported very accurately and intensively on our situation, but if you look at their headlines, it was there always University of George Soros. And when we asked them, why do you do this? Then their answer was, this is how we get more clicks. So you can consider that as a kind of liberal form of populism. But coming back to illiberal populism, of course, an English language postgraduate university specialized in humanities and social sciences is by definition an elite institution, and in that sense is an obvious target for populists. But what populists care about is not so much how people feel. More, what they want is the manifestation of popular will. What a populist politician dreams about is speaking in a public square surrounded by masses of people who cheer, who adore him, and who shout with anger the name of his opponents. Now, what turns out is that
a few politicians enjoy that.
Many politicians...
Doesn't happen in this country, I can tell you.
Well,
don't go to Glastonbury.
To some extent, some argue that all politicians are populist by definition. But what turns out is that it's very difficult to mobilize people against a university. And actually it's very easy to mobilize them in favor. So what I discovered is that I live in a city where tens of thousands of people come to the street when they hear that a university is in trouble. And I had the experience of marching with other 70,000 people who were shouting free society, free university, and chanting the name of my working place. So I hope you will never get into that situation, but if you do, enjoy the moment. It's really... Now, let me acknowledge that our case has several readings, and I'm sort of tempted to focus on the romantic ones. But there is a bureaucratic aspect that is also important. My university has 2 legal personalities and 2 accreditation. So it has a very special legal status. And to be honest, many European countries are not particularly hospitable for these kind of universities or to foreign universities in general. Actually, there are many countries that have more protectionist rules than Hungary. Maybe it is the time to think about universities that have more than one loyalty, universities that try to play the role of a bridge between different cultures, universities that have double citizenship or even European citizenship. Now, it would be very rude on my behalf if I gave tasks to the Europaeum as a new member, so the management should not take this too seriously. But I rather ask in a very polite way, is there any better organization than this one to think about the prospects of a university with European citizenship? So to conclude, I think that illiberalism and populism are essentially different phenomena. But I must acknowledge that there is a kind of marriage of convenience between them. Illiberal leaders very often project the existence of some kind of shadow power, a world conspiracy, vis-à-vis which they are themselves underdogs, just like ordinary people. And they speak about the network of elite institutions that run the world. I'm not well positioned here to go into details whether this model of how world politics is run is an accurate one or not. But I have to say that I did experience a network during the last couple of months. But this was the network of academics, that is students and professors. And what I noticed is that people in this profession, so to say, care about what happens with colleagues in other countries. Now, a kind of virtual network of universities exists in Europe since the Middle Ages, but I think what is new is for the first time universities are in position to actually give a helping hand to each other. And this is what is increasingly happening. This is what we benefit from being here. So let me close with this very optimistic conclusion.
Can I just ask you, before Radek speaks, can I just ask you this one question? We often talk about the European Union as a customs union. We also talk about it as a union of values. Do you think as a union of values you recognize some of the things it does?
In rhetoric, for sure. In terms of actions, I think now what all of us should watch is the European People's Party. Because now it's down to one particular organization to decide whether EU is about values or economic or other interests. They have the influence, they have the power, and they have the members whom they have to talk to and remind of these values. If they don't do that, then we will be a practically perhaps useful but ultimately incoherent and probably failing union, because sooner or later other politicians will also find out that you can get away with basically anything.
Thank you very much indeed. I fear that may be true. Now, talking about getting away with anything, I'd like to introduce an old friend, Radek Sikorski, who was, of course, a member of this university, and who was, among other things, Poland's foreign minister. He is known to our own foreign minister, and some of us might wish that they could swap positions just at the moment. But that, alas, is not open to us. But I'd like Radek to talk to us for a bit about what things look like at the moment in Poland and how he sees the issues which we're discussing this afternoon. Radek.
Well, thank you for those kind words, and gosh, how nice it is to be back in Oxford. So many friendly faces, so many memories, and mixed feelings. One of gratitude. I was a penniless refugee from communism in this town once, and I had no more hope of going back to a free country than you are entitled to today. But it happened. And Poland has had the best 30 years in its 1,000-year history. And I hope it happens to you too. I remember my admissions interview at Pembroke College, same college where Viktor Orban studied. Zbigniew Polczynski recused himself, so it was Simon Blackburn and Ken Mayhew. And they asked me, so what do you think about Marxism? And I said, I come from communist Poland. I haven't met a Marxist yet. But I hear there are some here. And indeed, I met some. But I also have a feeling of guilt, particularly seeing Professor Roberts here. He knows why. I was supposed to continue to study for an MPhil here, and instead I went to Afghanistan in 1986 to join the jihad there, fighting mainly with a pen. And then politics changed. I was actually in Angola in 1989, on the 4th of June, 1989. And very few people remember that there were 3 items of amazing news that day. Tiananmen Square, death of Ayatollah Khomeini, and only number 3 item was the solidarity victory in the partially free elections that day. And Poland exited from communism by negotiation, which is what some people today don't like, even some of the authors of that negotiation and that compromise. The audience here knows about the unfortunate turn of events in Poland. The authoritarians everywhere seems to play by a very similar playbook. First, you abolish the process of judicial review, so you have to paralyze or take over the Constitutional Tribunal, you take over the prosecution service, the security services, state media. Now there is an attempt to take over the judiciary. Let me just tell you a family history. My wife, Anne Applebaum, was a correspondent in Warsaw. My parents heard about her before I did. And she was subjected to one of those hours of hatred by a different Urban, Jerzy Urban, the spokesman of the communist government in the 1980s. And believe it or not, just recently, she was again the subject of a negative section of the main television news for besmirching Poland abroad, which consisted in writing a column for the Washington Post in which she dared to mention that in Smolensk in 2010 what we had was an air accident rather than assassination. There is always a conspiracy. There is always something hidden that authoritarians need to mobilize their support around. I'm happy to answer questions about Poland's general turn, In fact, if things go at the rate they're going, I might have to recreate the Sikorsky government in exile. But Paul asked me to say just a few words about academia in Poland, where things are more complicated. Recently, Polish state media played tapes. This is also one of the trademarks of the regime. You secretly tape someone, you show the contrast between how people communicate in private and how people communicate in public. There is nothing illegal, nothing untoward, just the difference in tone, and that's enough to score points in a political battle. Just like the Podesta emails, which were informal, nothing in them, but this is the technique. And I was quite rude about some of our top academics in Poland, and I stand by what I say. I had two major experiences with Polish academia. One as Minister of Defense, as a humble Oxford BA and MA, I actually appointed about 50 professors because Poland has 5 military academies. And the reason we still have 5 military academies was that we were once the second largest army of the Warsaw Pact, at peak 450,000 soldiers. Today we have less than 100,000 soldiers, which means that we need between 800 and 1,200 officers per annum. Okay? Multiply that by 4, which means that you need about 5,000 alumni, students of a medium-sized, even you might call it a small-size university. Instead, we have 5 military academies, and if you compute that total budget and divide by the number of students, the input is no less than per student at Harvard. The output, I assure you, is less laudable. And I tried to reform it because I think Poland needs a professional, a Polish Sandhurst, a Polish West Point, one university that would teach people with the kind of difference you need at a military academy, joint for all the services. And I failed, because the resistance of the academic body was too strong. The interests of the professors, of the rectors, of their helpers in the local communities just proved impossible to break. My second experience was as foreign minister. The communist authorities in the 1940s and 50s founded an institute called the Western Institute, in Polish, Instytut Zachodni, whose mission was to carry the ideological fight to the enemy, mainly in the direction of West Germany. And then, when freedom returned, they became a kind of small university researching Lusitian settlement in the 13th century. And I said, look, we have important interest in Germany, in Western Europe in general. I need you, since I supervise you as minister, I need you to be a think tank, to help us feed into our foreign policy debate. And this proved what you might think a sensible suggestion, given that I was also funding them. Completely impossible. And when I looked carefully into why this is so, I discovered that the council of the institute was dominated by its own employees. So there was no outside supervision, no quality control. And that in fact, the academics had a quarter or half a job in this institute, but they were making real money in all kinds of other, including private institutions. And there was no way to discipline them and to do what I needed them to do. So eventually I told the education minister, take this gift away, and we shifted the supervision of it away from the foreign ministry because it proved impossible to reform. One of the privileges of being out of politics is that you can say what you think. And I think Polish science is in deep trouble. It is provincial. It has a very low level of ambition. You can get a PhD for almost anything. An assistant of mine at the Foreign Ministry received a PhD for the history of Polish Consulate General in London, 45 to 89. Does that really add to the sum of human knowledge? I mean, you know.
Menus at the Gay Hussar.
Yeah, quite. And I don't see much ambition of the academic community to improve things. There is a proposal to change things in the right direction, building on proposals that were fielded by the previous government, worked on by some of the same people. And uncharacteristically for this Polish government, these proposals have actually been consulted. And they don't seem to have the same objective as all the other institutional reforms, which is to basically leave things as they are, but purge the people and replace elites. To put in new elites from the populist party. And as I see it, the trouble with it is that the Deputy Prime Minister, Mr. Gowin, who is the sponsor of this reform, will have a great deal of difficulty in actually enacting them. Either there will be change beyond recognition in the cabinet or in parliament, or if he sticks to his guns, he will be blocked. There have already been some critical comments, and he's not actually in the core of the ruling party. He's a coalition partner. But I wish him well, because Polish science deserves better than to be nowhere near even the third hundredth, according to the Shanghai Index. Not a single Polish university is in the first 400. I think one may be just hanging by its fingernails at the bottom of the first 400 of global universities. Not good. So it needs reform, and I just hope it's done right for once, because Poland has a general brain drain. I went back to Poland, but there are a million of my compatriots who are being encouraged to go back. We need them back. But the other tragic thing is that some of Poland's brightest and best are also leaving because they feel that world-class education can only be got abroad. So let me conclude by just saying that yes, Poland is going through its less liberal phase, but let's remember that the populists won by a fluke. Normally 38% of the vote doesn't give you a majority of seats in parliament. And also that they ran a very reasonable, moderate, pro-European campaign. They didn't win on a ticket of anti-liberalism and picking fights simultaneously with Russia, Germany, and the European Union. So the real test, both of characters, as these illiberal moves are being carried out, and of the proportion of our population that is committed to European values, the real test is coming now and at the next general election. And I just hope we pass the test.